Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. We're finally in the actual Christmas season, no longer in Advent.
He's trapped! Hooray!
And we are celebrating this week Epiphany. Now, what is Epiphany, you might ask? If you've ever had a nativity scene growing up as a kid, where you've got probably Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus, and you probably got some shepherds and some barn animals. And then you've got these three kings. Well, there weren't three of them, they weren't kings, and it begs the question, what exactly is Epiphany all about? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're talking about this week. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and Christianity sucks, it's boring, it's out of date, it's irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be. Let me explain why. So there's a bunch of terms we use. One is the three kings, but that's wrong, because there weren't three of them, and they weren't kings. The other is the wise men. Again, not three of them, but a closer description to what these people actually were. And the other is the Magi, and which is obviously rooted in magic and magicians. The truth is, they were probably astrologers from the East. And there weren't three of them, they were in a caravan. And when we read the text, you'll see that there's no mention of how many, there's no mention of their names, there's no mention of the birth of Jesus. They're actually talking about like a toddler that's 2 years older. And so this happens well after the events of the actual birth of Jesus. So let's take a look at it. It's in Matthew, and it's the only book in the Bible that mentions them at all. So it's not in Mark, Luke, or John, only Matthew. And we're going to talk about that too. So, I am reading from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. They sound like this. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, remember I said that, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler, who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. So not exactly the picture that we've painted in modern Christian culture of three kings traveling alone on camels or whatever and bringing gifts. No, this is an entire people group represented by astrologers, and they are kind of ambassadors from the East who believed that because of the stars and the movement of the lights in the sky, that the King of the Jews was going to be born, and they followed it, and lo and behold, there was Jesus, at least according to the story. Now, here's something that's interesting that we should talk about. If you want to know more about those details, go check out, I did a video a couple years ago about more of those details. So go check that out if you're curious about that. But this morning, whenever you're watching this, I want to talk about, there's kind of like two gospels that really talk about the birth of Jesus, and that's Matthew and Luke. Now, Matthew is the only one with the Magi, but Matthew doesn't mention anything about shepherds. Now, Luke mentions shepherds, but not the Magi. And they kind of represent a similar idea. Both Gospels put somebody in the story that represents not the people in power. The shepherds in Luke's Gospel were the oppressed, poor outskirts of the city. They didn't live in the city. They were the lowliest of the low. And the Magi, they're not lowly. They're wealthy if they're giving gold to a baby, but they are foreigners. They're people who shouldn't understand, and they are put in juxtaposition against Herod and all of Jerusalem. Remember, it says Herod was terrified at this news and all Jerusalem with him. So all the Jews are frightened and scared and upset that the King of the Jews is going to be born. This is a statement that Matthew's making about what Jesus actually represents. Now, to further illustrate this point, Matthew quotes from the book of Micah. It's an Old Testament minor prophet. And when Herod asks all the chief priests and scribes, they quote from the book of Micah. Now, why is this important? The book of Micah was written during a time, and it was about Babylon destroying the temple and scattering the people of Judea and Samaria. And the audience of Micah is Judah and Samaria. The Samaritans you probably recognized if you've read the Gospels at all. Samaritans and Judeans do not get along. They are antithetical and antagonistic towards each other. But Micah writes to both of them because and the rhythm of Micah goes like this. It follows a doom and hope pattern. So doom, he says, you guys are not doing it right, and God's going to send somebody to destroy the temple and scatter everyone. But there is hope, because that will not be the final thing that God does. But you are doomed because Babylon is coming and Babylon is going to destroy the temple. But there is hope because God will send someone. And so you can hear it. It's this cycle of doom and hope and doom and hope. This is from one of the hope sections of Micah. The chief priests and the scribes quote the hope of Micah to a people who are in power, comfortable, and under the oppressive boot of Rome. They should experience turmoil at the oppression of Rome, but instead they're experiencing wealth and comfort. They're experiencing political control. They're getting what they want out of the system. And so when a verse of hope of Rome being overthrown or things radically changing and the power structures changing, the voice of hope to them is a voice of disaster. They are terrified because it means that they are going to lose their power and their comfort, and the lowly people, kind of like the shepherds in Luke, but in this case, represented by foreigners, represented by the people who the utmost don't belong. They are excited about it, and they want to come and pay homage. They want this to actually go through and to happen. So what does this tell us about Jesus, about God, and about hope? Well, isn't it interesting that we celebrate not only Christmas, but also the changing of the new year during the darkest, longest nights? The wintertime is the winter solstice. That we have the longest, darkest nights of the year. And there it is, in the midst of the darkest, longest nights, a message of hope, a message that says God has not forgotten you. God hears your cry, and God has brought heaven down to you in an unexpected way. In the form of a baby, and that hope and that heaven and that baby mean revolution. It means that the people who are oppressive and who use their power for their own good and who forsake the needs of others, those people will be overthrown, and the people who are in need, the people who are being oppressed, the people who want to bring a message of hope to others, those people will be lifted up. This baby is more than a baby. This baby is a revolutionary word of grace made manifest. It is heaven come to earth. So, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and may you have a hope-filled epiphany. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.